Minutes do you want?
Uh, Maximum 1 hour. So
Okay, one
we're
hour. My
starting
God.
bang at
Okay.
8. And welcome to both of my guests, Mr. Vivek Katju and Maleeha Lodhi. Thank you to both of you for taking the time out to have this really important conversation at this really, really critical time in the subcontinent. And I think it's only fitting to begin with a note of acknowledgement of an atrocity that has happened in India. And I, for one, am not shy in the least to unequivocally basically call it a terrorist act, a condemnable terrorist act, not just the act but the perpetrators. And It has brought both countries into another one of the standoffs that they keep finding themselves stuck in every few years. Although this time it seems a bit more serious, the nature of the exchanges being made from on both sides are a bit more serious than they've been in the past. But anyways, you're all welcome to look up Vivek Kaju and Maleeha Lodhi yourselves and find out what illustrious careers they've had in diplomacy. But we're going to dispense with the formalities here tonight. And Vivek, I'd like to start with you. Could you sum up for us what the mood over there in India is and how are you seeing things shape up?
Well, the mood is one of substantial anger. Uh, I think that the nature of the terrorist attack was bound to lead to this anger, and people who died or who were killed uh, came from all across the country. They were out on a touristic experience with their families, and the stories that are coming out of the way the terrorists treated women and children are horrific. And the one that distressed me, particularly among others, was this about a young child who was all of three telling his mother that, Mama, look, from daddy's head, some red paint is coming out. Now, when these stories spread through the country, then you can imagine that there's one of that anguish and anger is all mixed, and particularly when the targeting was done on religious grounds. Uh, there was one Muslim Kashmiri who was a pony uh, owner who was taking ponies, and he, I must say, showed extraordinary courage. He leapt at a terrorist and tried to seize his gun and told him, "Why are you killing innocents? What have they done?" So there's a great anger all over the country, and I don't think it will be assuaged early. In Kashmir too, from the reports that are coming in, there is
Well, there was a protest today by
there is a
both from
protest
the
because,
Lake.
among other reasons, because this is the beginning of the tourist season. The last two seasons were good. This season was expected to be particularly good, and uh, now there will naturally be consequences on tourism. And
What sort of
the
consequences
Kashmiri
are
has
you looking
been,
at? What sort of
well,
consequences are you envisioning?
I think their livelihood is being impacted, and that is something that no one wants.
Do you foresee or anticipate a ramping up of the surveillance, the repression that Kashmir has been seeing in India in the recent years in response to
Look,
this?
I, Khurram, I must be candid with you. I think the word depression is a word that is often used in Pakistan about the situation in Kashmir. That's not a word I would use. Uh, there are certain security restrictions because of the activities of the terrorists, but these exaggerated terms that are lobbed around, that it's an open jail, that there's widespread repression. Were that so, then would you have lakhs and lakhs of tourists visiting Kashmir, and if there were checkposts at every spot, at every few yards, and if people felt unsafe, would that be so? Whether they were locals or uh, people from outside the country or outside the state or outside India too.
Okay,
So
sir.
I think I would strongly disagree with this term that you use.
Okay, but coming back to the standoff between the two countries, it has sparked mutual recriminations, and India has already announced certain steps against Pakistan. Um, how is it justified to start, assigning blame on Pakistan when at a time when evidence hasn't really come in about what has happened over there, who the perpetrators might be?
I think there has been a pattern over the last 35 years, a pattern that we are security people and that we know well. And some of the uh, perpetrators have been identified, the links are known. Uh, so I don't think that our people are talking out of their hat. Now, as far as the steps that were taken yesterday after the Cabinet Committee on Security met, if you notice, there was a very brief statement announcing the steps. No questions were taken, no press conferences were held, and that's it. The most important step, of course, was that the treaty, the Indus Waters Treaty, was held in abeyance, and it was linked to the stoppage of terrorist activity from Pakistan. But apart from that, there were things that I would, as a former diplomat, think uh, not very substantive. Of course, the mission strengths were reduced, the army personnel were withdrawn, and from Pakistan side they were asked to leave. But what was significant to me was that the ceasefire of February 21 was not commented on, nor the conversation which is weekly between the DGMOs of the two armies. And that's significant. What
Okay.
I noticed today was that on Pakistan side, however, the ratcheting was phenomenal. It
How
was
so?
the statement. The statement is long. It touches upon not only this incident, it touches upon Kashmir, it touches upon so called treatment of minorities in India, it touches upon matters which lie completely within India's sovereign jurisdiction, like domestic laws. It touches upon ideologies, and I'm particularly concerned, and that is what attracted my attention the most was the penultimate paragraph of the statement, where there was a reiteration of the foundational principles of Pakistan. Now we all know that, but I really didn't see any need for the reiteration of these foundational principles in a statement like this. And quite clearly, I can only suppose that they flow from the elaboration of these principles and the manner in which it was done by your army chief, General Asim Munir. I, for one, cannot recollect at all, and Maleeha ji, and you can correct me, if ever a Pakistani political personality or an army chief has spoken about your foundational principles in the manner in which Asim Munir has done. And that caused consternation in India that why is he doing this? Why is he repeating the rhetoric of the 1940s when it is not done at all? Now, uh, uh, clearly it's his choice to do so. But it's a very dangerous thing to recall the rhetoric of the 1970s. I know that the army thinks that it's the defender of the ideological frontiers of Pakistan, but if in the past, I think it's left it at that. It hasn't gone beyond talking in communal terms. But this
Yeah.
rank communalism expressed by the army chief was
Well,
astonishing to me.
Malia, can
Someone
I invite
who's been,
Malia,
I'll
can I
just
invite
one
you into
sentence.
this? There's lots to actually engage with and react to in what Vivek has just said. And I don't want the conversation to sort of go down the rabbit hole of, to sort of like start relitigating the whole Kashmir dispute to the extent of keeping it focused on the present day standoff that has ensued as a result of the, the terror attack in Pahalgam. Uh, you know, um, do you think that based on what Vivek has just said that there are grounds for do you see the grounds for India to actually even suspect that Pakistan may have been behind this terror attack?
Well, I think if a country cannot produce any evidence, it's hard for my country then to accept any blame. We need to see evidence. But I do want to make some other points, Khurram. Uh,
Please.
this is a somber moment for the subcontinent, for the region. I believe that we are back on the brink, Pakistan and India. And I also believe that the present tensions are driving the subcontinent into uncharted territory because what has been discarded are bilateral instruments, treaties, as well as any resort to communication. When you know, call for or take measures or steps that end up in diplomatic disengagement, whatever little engagement that was going on, by very shrunken high commissions have been further shrunk by India's retaliatory steps, as it called them. I think this is a very dangerous moment. This is the fifth such crisis since Kargil, and each time I think the crisis gets more complex, and there is this sense that we don't know where we're headed. And because we have no mechanism to manage tensions, to ensure that when a crisis does erupt, for whatever reason, the two countries' nuclear neighbors are able to talk to each other. Even if they talk past each other, doesn't matter, but they talk to each other and are able to say to each other, well, this is what we think. And the other country turns around and says, well, we don't quite agree with you, but sure, I mean, we're willing to look into this matter. So, I can understand the anger, of course. And I have been one of the people who in several TV interviews have condemned what happened in this terrorist attack. I think any attack that targets civilians is completely unacceptable. You cannot justify it. But I think, having said that, it's all very well to sort of rubbish Pakistan's position on Kashmir, but it is a position that's based on law and based on reality. This is an international dispute and remains so, and this incident occurred in a certain context. And we can't take that context away, while not justifying by any means what happened in that incident. So I think, I've been writing about it, I've been calling for it, and I will reiterate my call. I think this is time for cooler heads to prevail. It's time for rationality. It is time to put in place some kind of mechanism and re-establish a back channel so that the two countries can talk to each other and see how they can address each other's concerns. We have had periods in the past, Vivekji, you will agree. We have had periods in the past where there has been sustained conversations between the two countries. We've not managed to resolve any dispute. And yes, terrorism is India's topmost concern. Pakistan's topmost concern has historically been Kashmir. But there are many areas that we have put in a basket in what used to be called the composite dialogue. Now, who discarded that dialogue? India. And, irrespective of, how long it's been, how many years it's been since we last had that conversation along 6 baskets of issues, which actually met the priorities of both sides. And I think that was the value of that dialogue, that it managed to reflect the priorities of the two countries, which were obviously very different and not convergent at all. But as responsible nuclear neighbors, I think we really need to ensure that we're not just playing to the domestic audience, important as it is, I think, on both sides. One can't, again, wish that away, but to be responsible and to say to each other, we have a difference of opinion, and it's a very, very sharp one. And we need to somehow resolve it and sort it out.
Maleeha,
But to go public, G,
sorry, Nali, I want you to
conclude
finish
on
your
that.
sentence.
I'll just conclude on that. But to go public, irrespective of whether the statement is long or short, and then to take the irresponsible act of announcing a suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, I mean, that does nothing. And, I will leave this to Vivek ji to address. Does that approach bring India closer to getting a resolution of its topmost priority, which is the issue of terrorism? Or does it take India away from it? Does disengagement help India? Or does disengagement hinder the process of trying to address issues that are important to India and, of course, to Pakistan as well?
Okay, I think that's a perfect cue at which to throw the conversation back to Vivek. I did have a question for you regarding Pakistan's own diplomatic response, but we can come back to that later. Let's hear from Vivek right now in response to what you just said. Do you think that the steps India has taken as a professional diplomat, would this have been your advice? Do you think that these are constructive steps that they are taking to help address the crisis?
Well, I'm happy that Maleeha ji referred to the composite dialogue. I can share with you that the final drafts of the composite dialogue, for the first time in 1998, were done by the late Mr. Tariq Altaf and yours truly, sitting
Yes,
in a
that's true.
hotel in Durban. So I know a little bit about the composite dialogue and how it was done. I know also the great hopes that we had of how that would progress, and I don't want to go into why the first round of the composite dialogue and the great hope that that was there with the Prime Minister Vajpayee visiting Lahore, and then the Lahore Declaration, that how all those were dashed in the icy heights of Kargil.
But Vivek, if I can just bring you to the present.
So I'm coming to the present. I'm coming to the present. But permit me one other thing. Since Maleeha ji made a categorical statement that we turned our back on the composite dialogue, if my memory is correct, we go back to December of 2015. Sushma Swaraj, who was then our foreign external affairs minister, visited Islamabad for a conference on Afghanistan, and on its sidelines agreed to a comprehensive bilateral dialogue. And then Prime Minister Modi took the extraordinary step of visiting Lahore on Christmas Day of 2015, really to cement that process, to take it forward. So those who say that Modi is belligerent, etc., should always recall that. And then we know that within 10 days of that, there was Pathankot. The airbase in Pathankot was attacked. He still persisted and allowed a joint investigation team from Pakistan to visit India, to visit the airbase, and there was this unprecedented step of that team, including an officer of the ISI. So you can imagine how far he went in search of peace with Pakistan. It is in
Well, sir,
2016 all that
but sir,
ended.
since you brought
Now we come to today. From 2019 onwards, yes, it's true that there is a gap. And I must tell you straight away that India's priorities in these last 5 years have changed. I'm not trying to be boastful in any way, but it's a fact that we are now the world's fifth largest economy. We hope that by the end of this decade, we'll be the third largest economy. Our interests have uh, changed. Our scope is increasing, and uh, there were changes made, constitutional changes made in Pakistan. How Pakistan reacted to those constitutional changes, I've always found totally unnecessary, but that was for Pakistan to decide. But all these years, things were moving in a particular manner, which was giving uh, some modicum of stability, even if there wasn't communication, but there was a modicum of stability, even if there was a distance in the relationship. But my final point, Khurram, here is this: the talking of evidence. I go back and please, you can play it. The media conference addressed by General Chaudhary, Lieutenant General Chaudhary, your DG ISPR, on the Jafar Express attack by the Baluch terrorists, blamed India squarely, and there was no evidence given to us. No evidence was shared, nothing. You go there. What does he say? That while, I mean, you see, can there be anything more ludicrous than this? That he says that while this was going on, there was informational warfare taking place in India because the Indian channels were reporting this. So let's not go into the evidence aspect. Let's not go into finger pointing, because then it becomes a game of tutu meme, and that's not what something I want to indulge in.
okay, no, fair
Maleeha ji,
enough.
please, if you haven't seen that press conference, please see it. Your CM,
I
I
think
think is Sarfaraz Bhukti, if I'm not mistaken, sitting right next to him.
we've all seen that
And
press
he,
conference. But if I may just bring the matter back to the question back at hand, the matter at hand, which is the question of evidence. Now, you mentioned what happened in Pathankot. There was a team that went from Pakistan that was given extraordinary access, that an extraordinary step was taken to include a member of the ISI. You said that this shows how far India was willing to go in search of peace, but it also shows how far India was willing to go back in those days in search of evidence, in search of actual material evidence to try and unearth who the perpetrators were, where they came from, who facilitated them, and all those things. There's a complete absence of any such steps today.
no,
Um,
Khurram, I have a
I'm
different
just
take on that. We
okay.
knew who they were. We were wanting you to get satisfied, the Pakistan side to get satisfied. The Pakistan side said that it will assist our investigations. We said, fine, we know who they are, we have the records. But if you want to come and see the scenes yourself, you can come and do so. If you need to see the scenes for your further judicial process, you can come and see it. But we know who they are. And look, it's no secret. You've got the Tanzeems who spew venom every day. And for the life of me, I don't understand why these Tanzeems are allowed to be in Raiwind, to be in Bahawalpur. I mean, these are your concerns. This is your society. This is
Think,
your
do you think?
polity. You can decide
So,
the
do you
way you
think?
wish to go. But I have never understood what advantage Pakistan gains socially, politically, culturally, spiritually, or strategically by letting these tanzeems flourish.
Okay, but do you think at this point in time, if we I want to keep the conversation to the extent I can tethered to the standoff at hand. I know that there are contexts that take us in all directions. But at this point in time, do you think it's helpful for diplomacy to continue or to proceed in the absence of any evidence? Because there really isn't any for now, at least none that's been shared, and no one's even claimed on the Indian side that they are in possession of any evidence.
I think the question of evidence is continuously raised. I have not heard an answer from either Maleeha ji or you on why there was no evidence shared or shown regarding the allegations made on the Jafar Express attack. So I can lob the same thing back at you. There was no evidence shared, and yet the DG ISPR went for a good 1 hour and more.
But
I was
Vivek, come on,
aghast
there's a
when I
big
saw that
difference
press
between,
conference.
there's
Even the
one big
public
difference
believed.
between that situation and the one that we
Yeah.
are in right now. The one we are in right
Yes.
now has created a standoff, and war clouds are gathering over this country. That didn't happen after the Jafar Express. We had a statement and that was the end of it. Pakistan did not announce unilateral steps to degrade the diplomatic relations between both countries, to step out of bilateral treaties or withdraw from them, or even hold them in abeyance. That didn't happen. No? So as a result, that there was an allegation. It came, it went. I don't know how much traction the allegation found on the other side. Whether there was any request from the
The,
Indian side. Well, if you have evidence,
I
please
think,
share it with us. But in this particular situation, we have active
I,
steps being taken by the Indian government, and
I
yet
think, I
we don't know
think,
on
I
what
think
basis.
the answer to that is obvious. The nature of the crime, this horrible crime that was committed in Pahalgam. You had children, 3 years old, 4 years old. You had women, you had newlyweds. If I tell you things that were done, people were asked to take off their trousers. Do you think we'll forget that?
No, I don't
Rank
think anyone is
communalism,
asking.
completely communal. Now, that is something which impacts the psyche. So the things are different. When you ask for evidence, do I need to share evidence with you on the nature of the attack? When I hear your army chief talk in the most communal terms a week before that, how do you think an average Indian would refract this? You may
Can
laugh,
I come in?
Maleeha ji. You may laugh,
Ji,
but
nahi, I'm not
I hear
laughing.
your army ji. Have you ever heard any other army chief other than Asim Munir? He may be a great soldier, but I think you, Maleeha ji, perhaps can give him a little lesson in diplomacy. He needs that.
Malia, that's your perfect invitation to please enter the conversation
Look,
and react to some of what's been said.
look, nobody can underplay or underestimate the anguish of those who lost their loved ones in that terror attack. But I think one should also keep other issues in perspective. In Balochistan, I'm not going to go into the DGISPR's presser, but I will say only one thing. We actually have an Indian spy in our custody. His name, you know very well. I don't need to name him. I mean, what better evidence, what stronger evidence do we need of the kind of intervention that has taken place in Balochistan? Now, I have written consistently that the Baloch problem is for us to address, and its internal dimensions are what we need to focus on, because that allows external parties to come and manipulate the situation. So I will leave it at that. But, to exaggerate what the army chief has said, I mean, he used formulations that we use routinely. There's nothing new in what he said. And look at the context. He's speaking to the Pakistani diaspora. It was a convention called for overseas Pakistanis. So what do you do at a convention like that? You talk up confidence. You tell them about the essence of Pakistan. And you also talk about the importance of Kashmir. I mean, most of our diaspora in the UK actually consists of Kashmiris. So remember the audience he's speaking to. So I think to take his remarks completely out of context and say that he meant ill and that there was some malign motive, I think it sort of misses the point. But I would like still to return to the need for dialogue between the two countries. Look, the more severe the crisis, the greater the need to talk. There is no substitute. And you talk to your enemy, you don't talk to your friends, as that famous it may be a cliche, but it's so true. You make peace with your enemy. You talk to your enemy. You have a conversation. You may not be able to resolve issues, but this is where we need to be. I think it's a perilous moment because we don't know where we're headed. And I don't think it resembles any previous crisis, frankly, because never before have we thrown away just about everything. Bilateral treaties, and as Khurram just said, downgrading diplomatic ties to the extent that we have, no back channel in operation. We can't rely on third parties. I don't believe in that. Why do we rely on third parties to come in and diffuse the crisis? We need to do this by ourselves. We should be behaving like mature countries. And yes, there is pain and anguish on one side, but there is also hurt on the other side. Look, the present situation really emerges. I'm not saying the terror attack, but I'm saying the kind of low level of ties between India and Pakistan. I mean, ties plunged to one of the lowest levels because of India's action of August 2019. Let's not throw that out of the window and pretend it didn't happen. This is an internationally recognized dispute. It remains on the agenda of the UN Security Council. And what did India do? It unilaterally goes in and annexes occupied Jammu and Kashmir and says to Pakistan, we don't want to talk about this anymore. We resolved it. The whole, I mean, you were, as you were rightly saying, part of the composite dialogue. What was the composite dialogue predicated on? It was predicated on issues that were of concern for both sides, including Kashmir. Peace and security, Kashmir, trade, terrorism, drug trafficking, people-to-people contact. I mean, why I mentioned that is not just for the sake of history. I mentioned that because it tells us about what was possible and what can still be possible in the future. If we could have done that in the past, why can't we do that in the future? Why does it always have to be a confrontation? And these, again, Khurram described it well, mutual recriminations, blame game, accusing each other of the worst possible motive. Fine. Having done that, we need to move on. How can we stay in that state? How does it help any country to stay in that state? I mean, that's my question to you. And I will return to a question which I'd like very much, Vivekji, for you to answer. Does a diplomatic rupture with Pakistan and the kind of allegations that have been hurled at Pakistan, does that help India meet its objective of ensuring an end to terrorism? Or does it not? I mean, that's my question.
I think you... let me begin by saying that I think all of us in India, including the government, especially the government perhaps, would like nothing better than a peaceful salvation. It makes sense. It's in our interest. The question is, why is it not so? My first point is that you've talked of that our statement yesterday was very belligerent, that for the first time we brought in the Indus Waters Treaty, which we have, of course, asked to be renegotiated, but that's a separate issue. All your points would have been valid had the Pakistan response after the National Security Council meeting would not have been as, how should I put it, as ratcheting up the situation as it has. If your response had been restrained, you had a credible case to argue. But Maleeha ji, that's not been your response. At no stage has Pakistan indicated what you are saying, that there should be dialogue, we are open to talk. On the other hand, it's been belligerent, it's been aggressive, it's been the full Monty actually. You've thrown in everything. Closing of airspace, fine, we'll take it. Our economy is big enough and strong enough to take it. You've stopped trade that harms you, doesn't harm us. You've stopped visas, so have we, that's fine. The Pakistani side has not indicated any desire for dialogue that you are mentioning. So, if a cooler response had prevailed or had come forth from Pakistan, you would have had a case to argue. But that's not what's happened. If we, in there was no press conference held after our statement. In fact, the Foreign Secretary yesterday, Vikram Misri, said, I will take no questions. He just made these announcements and left. On the other hand, today, after your National Security Council meeting, you had almost half the cabinet ministers led by the Deputy Prime Minister speaking, and speaking in the most belligerent tones. That is not a sign of wanting to cool down temperatures or wanting to engage. It is a sign of aggression. Second, you mentioned that the army chief, he was addressing a group of Pakistanis. He could have made his case on Kashmir. Did he have to become communal the way he did? That is the question I put to you. Did he really have to be communal? He was rank communal, and as I've said, and you've not answered that, I've never heard a Pakistani leader or a Pakistani army chief speak in those terms. What conclusion should I, as an Indian, draw from that? That he wants to promote communalism in India, which is a very, very dangerous, if not a diabolical game to play. We are rooted in our secularism. Our people are secular. Our constitution is secular. It's different from yours. And we
Vivek
are
Saab.
confident about our secularism. But
Vivek Saab.
communalism,
Vivek Saab,
communalism coming from the army chief, he talks in these terms. Please play that clip. Khurram,
I
you'll
think
hear it.
I think I have
Last
to.
point. The last.
But Vivek
No,
Saab, that's getting a bit much. Now we're looking at probably the most communal government India has ever had in its history. I mean, you can't be telling us now about Indian secularism. That just takes the conversation.
Exactly.
You've taken the conversation in a very unhelpful direction suddenly, because
No.
it's
Please,
very
I will
difficult to
answer
now
that.
see a secular
I,
India.
I will answer you. The constitution still holds. For example, the Waqf uh, Act has been challenged in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has had objections to certain sections, and the government has held it in abeyance. That's a sign of a secular constitution at play. The
Correct.
government may have an ideology, but the constitution is firm. But
No, but
let's
I mean,
leave this aside. But let's
no,
leave this aside and come, because I can argue this
let,
all
if we
through the
can,
evening. But let us come today. And that is why I have said that today, yes, cooler heads must prevail. But I have not seen any sign of a cool head in Islamabad or Pindi today at all.
Maleeha, are you seeing cool heads in Islamabad or Pindi? And what about cooler heads
And
in Delhi? I
I'll
mean,
say, I'll just say one thing, Vivek ji, because I'm obliged to respond. I don't think it's General Asim Munir who's promoting communalism in India. We know exactly who has been doing that. So I will leave it at that. as far as cooler heads, you're saying what I have been advocating is not being reflected in my government's position. I'm here to give my views. I'm not here to give my government's views. And I'd like very much to urge my government, which is what I do in what I say and what I write, that dialogue is the only way forward. But if your country shuts off all avenues for conversation, I will still continue to say that. But it does make it hard then for the government in Pakistan to respond, and I think the escalation has been taken to a point largely because of the kind of orchestrated overdrive in the Indian media, blaming Pakistan for what happened
But
in occupied
Maleeha,
Kashmir.
to come back to a point that Vivek is making. I mean, do you think Pakistan's official responses are overwrought? I noticed, for example, the very weak statement given in the wake of the terror attack itself. It stopped short of actually condemning the attack. It expressed concern over it.
I would have preferred for the initial statement to have condemned the attack. That would have been my preference. But in terms of the kind of steps that Pakistan has announced, which mirror India's steps, I think Pakistan was left with no choice but to also respond to what India had announced. And I think amongst those announcements, we've just been referring to it. I mean, to say that the Indus Water Treaty, we're going to just cast aside, essentially. You're right, Vivekji, we have been responding to India's desire to renegotiate the treaty. We've actually said, let's meet and tell us about your concerns. But you can't alter the treaty unilaterally because legally you have absolutely no right to do that according to the provisions of the treaty. So Pakistan has never said no to renegotiation. Pakistan has simply said, why don't we talk about it? And then let's see what we can do. That has been the record. I have followed this very closely in the last 2.5 years. And I know we have, however, said that the appropriate forum to do this is the Permanent Indus Water Commission. And that has not met, as you know. So, my call as a citizen of my country, as a former diplomat, as somebody who's worked on these issues, as somebody who really believes in peace, I would still reiterate my call for a dialogue and certainly a back channel, but a back channel that's an ongoing back channel, not one that springs into action now and then it just disappears. We need something that we can talk to each other. The stakes are very high for two nuclear neighbors. We cannot have a situation where there is any room for miscalculation. That would be hugely irresponsible. And I think both sides need to step back and see how we can de-escalate the situation and get back to a situation where we're at least talking to each other.
Okay. I've got a couple of other questions I want to take this towards, but while we are speaking, all three of us here, and it's right now 8:43 p.m. on April 24th, 2025, that we're having this conversation. At this very point in time, we've got the Security Council sitting in New York, and they are in the middle of drafting their statement, which I think should be out by the time we wake up tomorrow morning, all three of us, unless it gets stuck. But it's undergoing various iterations of the draft. If in the final statement there is no mention of culpability of Pakistan or any kind of mention of Pakistan being behind this incident, then Vivek, is it fair to assume or to understand that India has actually failed to convince the world that Pakistan was indeed culpable in some way for this act, and were India's actions to degrade diplomatic relations and walk out of the treaty perhaps overblown and premature in that context?
The Security Council, as we all know, and Maleeha ji more than me, is a highly political body. I, for one, do not believe that it will reflect in its the statement uh, especially when there are friends of Pakistan who have vetoes to reflect a position which will embarrass Pakistan in any way. So let's leave that aside. I think the statement will be more anodyne, as such statements, in my experience, have always been at the start of what they perceive can grow into a threat to international peace and security. But I want to come to a more basic point. We've held the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. If Pakistan had not held any other bilateral instrument in abeyance, it had a case to say that what India has done is wrong. But if it has reciprocated in kind, then it has no case at all. Because uh, we've done it, you've done it too. It is not as if Pakistan has shown a remarkable degree of restraint in this manner. That is the point I'm trying to convey. That at this time, if we've gone X, you've gone super X. You've really ratcheted it up. And if that is your way, as it has always been of confrontation, I think our Pakistani friends have to think deeply. Now, let me throw out an idea. If you have an adversarial relationship, and this is a conceptual thing, if you have an adversarial relationship with another country, a neighbor, for instance, India, Pakistan, there are myriad ways of handling it. Confrontation is not the only way. You can enmesh the adversary in a web of relationships which are cooperative and diffuse his stings. But Pakistan instinctively chooses the path of confrontation and believes that it can browbeat a larger neighbor through this macho approach. It doesn't work.
Vivek sir, can
No,
you
my
tell
last
me?
permit me just this. We have seen this all through history. And for the life of me, I fail to understand why is it that our Pakistani friends do not understand India. Right from the
I think,
beginning, there's been an
yeah,
absence of understanding.
I just want to jump in here. I want to jump
Please.
in here very
Go ahead,
quickly.
Maleeha.
My understanding of what we have said about bilateral treaties or agreements is that we reserve the right to put them in abeyance. My understanding is that we have not, in fact, put them in abeyance. The language is
Let
vague.
me let
That
me
I agree. Language
let
is
me
vague.
let me read out to you what I have
But in
as
English, it
I'm also
seems to
hard pressed
suggest.
to I'm also hard pressed to think of any examples of when Pakistan undertook. I mean, there are these terrorist incidents that have happened over the past quarter century, but I'm hard pressed to recall an incident where Pakistan, initiated any kind of military hostilities with India. So, I mean, how can Pakistan be accused of browbeating India? There are a lot of accusations that have been made on Pakistan over the past quarter century, but this is a new one.
1965. I don't have to remind you of 1965. There is enough evidence of all Operation Gibraltar, etc. Do I have to remind you 1948 when raiders were
Okay.
sent
Okay.
who were
So
army
we're going
officers?
so we're
So,
going
so,
that
so,
far back.
so I think yes, yes, of course, history. If you talk of history, you've got to go back to the beginnings, Khurram. I
I
mean,
fully agree, sir. But then,
no,
that's
but
a very
I'm trying
long
to
and a
think
very,
of.
very
I'm trying to think of. No, just one second. What does it say? The statement, I have it here. Just one moment. I want to exactly quote what it says um, about
the bilateral
Well, that's
the
my
agreements.
bilateral.
understanding. Yeah, that's my
Pakistan.
understanding.
It
Very
says
vague.
Pakistan. Pakistan shall exercise the right to hold all bilateral agreements with India, including but not limited to similar agreement in abeyance. Well, how else
Yes.
should I conclude that you are holding them in abeyance? This is the
Well, I
exact
think,
language of your statement.
right,
I'm reading it
right.
out.
In Urdu, it sounds different. In English, it sounds
Uh,
different.
uh,
So
well,
perhaps,
I go by English, noting the reckless and irresponsible behavior of India, which disregards international conventions, UN Security Council resolutions, and international obligations at will. Pakistan shall exercise the right to hold all bilateral agreements with India, including but not limited to similar agreement in abeyance.
You're talking about
well,
today's
I,
statement, no?
yes, I
Yes,
think
this
if
is
that's
Not
the,
today's
the latest
statement.
water treaty.
I
So
think
you are.
again, yes, if that's the case, then as I said before, Pakistan seems to be matching or mirroring what India has done. And I think my point is we need to somehow get out of this situation. I mean, both sides have had their say. Both sides need to step back. And I think now the speculation, because Khurram, we've not addressed this, and this is very, very serious, the speculation that's rife in your country. And of course, it's creating obviously consternation and doubts in my country, which is the Indian government considering any kind of kinetic action against Pakistan? Now, if that were to happen,
That's where I wanted to come to as well.
if that
It,
were to happen, we will have a full-blown crisis in our relationship. And who's going to now diffuse that crisis? This is very dangerous. So I think, we need to, for that reason alone, that we don't want to get to that point, we need, as you yourself said a little while ago, cooler heads now that both countries have had their say. You said what you wanted to say, we've said what we wanted to say. Step back, talk to each other, try to diffuse the situation.
Vivek Saab,
See if, yeah,
is
go
kinetic
ahead.
action under consideration over there? Let's take the
I
conversation. Then we've got a little bit of time left, and that's an
I would
important.
no. I know you have a time. I think Khurram, in all honesty, I would not like to venture into the options that the government is considering because for the simple reason that I have nothing to do with the government, not even remotely. So it would be
Would,
dishonest of me to
okay,
make
but
any
if you
comment
were,
there.
so would your advice be to the government to consider kinetic action at a
I
time like
I,
this,
I, I
or would you advise to stop
fortunately
short of that?
Fortunately, my mind doesn't go, does freezes when I don't have to give advice. And I'm not trying to duck a question, but I'm built like this. If I have to give advice, then I think of it. But if I don't, then I don't think of it. But certainly,
If we do consider the but
let
sir, I
me
do want
go
to stay
back.
on the question of kinetic action here for a minute. I have one more follow-up question on that, which is that,
Yeah,
okay, no advice from you. You don't know what's going on within the government, but do you see any good options as far as kinetic action is concerned for India? They've tried missile strikes in the past. We've tried general mobilization in 2002. Neither one of those seem to have served any useful purpose. Is there a third model that you can think of that
no,
would maybe help?
yes, a third model would be very helpful if Pakistan were to turn its back on terror. If it turns its back on terror, then as far as bilateral ties are concerned, they will morph almost immediately.
I'm talking about kinetic action
That
on the
is the
part of
model.
India.
Look on in the two incidents, past incidents, which India thought were unacceptable, then India resorted to the use of force. Uh, I do not know how the officials them in the country, the government is considering this particular incident. What definition? How is it defining this incident? But I'm clear in my mind, and Maleeha ji mentioned that both of us are nuclear neighbors, which of course we are. But I'm clear in my mind that the first step on an escalatory ladder is if one country makes the use of terror as a part of its security doctrine. And I regret to say that it is my impression, based on my conversations with many Pakistani friends, that Pakistan thinks that low intensity uh, war, if I may use it, or low intensity actions against India, because of the disparity in conventional force levels, is a perfectly valid defense posture. I've always felt it's much too dangerous. It's not something that is advisable for nuclear weapon states to take. Let me put it to you that during the Cold War, the two nuclear superpowers played games all over the world. But did they ever play games on each other's territories? Was there ever a Mumbai like attack undertaken by the Americans on Soviet territory or vice versa? And you can't deny the actual fact of Mumbai. It did take place. The Lashkar undertook it. Your own police officers have confirmed that their investigations showed that the Lashkar had undertaken it.
Sir,
Yes,
yes,
but Vivek,
So the
Vivek,
point that
I
I
believe,
I'm
think,
trying to make, the point
okay,
Vivek
I'm trying to make is a very simple
Maleeha,
one,
Vivek's
that
making a
you've got
good
to give
point
it
here.
up.
Vivek's making a good point here. Okay, there
I'm
is
not,
one more thing that to say about Mumbai, which I'll hold off on the moment. But I want you to address this question that India is not alone in leveling this charge at Pakistan. That Pakistan has allowed itself to become a nursery for terrorist organizations in the past, and that it has been an exporter of terrorism in the past. Uh, and that past, people can't seem to shake the memory of those years. When a new incident of terror happens, it's only natural to expect that people will
you
recall
know,
all that.
fine.
And
Okay. My answer to
so,
that is, what do you do? What do? You break off ties with that country that you're accusing all of this. You don't want to talk to that country. You threaten that country. You demonize that country. I mean, what is the answer? I mean, my response to that is you hold certain views about Pakistan. We hold certain views about India too. We hold views about what India has done, how it has dealt with us. And I don't want to get into the history. So, I mean, both countries have clashing narratives. Sure, that's why we have an adversarial relationship. So, I mean, I want to get past all of this and ask, where do we go from here? Do we continue to mouth the same narrative and then go home? Or do we say to each other, fine, we know you think that of us. Let's sit down and see if we can figure out a way to address your concern. And you figure out a way to address our concern too. I think
Vivek, where
that's
do
what
we go
diplomacy.
from
I,
here?
I, I,
That,
Where
I
do we
that's
go
what
I
from
I'm.
would
here?
That's what I'm.
Two,
look.
That's what I'm. That's what
two
I'm
things.
I
trained to do.
would
I
Either
am
we
I,
go
not
to
I,
a soldier.
kinetic action or
I
we move away
I
from
am
there.
not trained.
I would
That's the point. That's my
I
point. I
would
mean, what do you do? You want to take a strike on Pakistani territory? Well, we'll respond then. Is that helpful? No, it's not. So I
I
return
would
again and again to the same point. Is
I
it
would
helpful to try to cast a country as some kind of demon which has done all sorts of bad things? Or is it more useful to talk to that country and tell that country, we have these
Let's give Vivek a
concerns?
chance to respond to that. I'd be keen to hear what he has to say about it.
I recollect that in 1999 at Lahore, the Prime Minister Vajpayee took the extraordinary step of going to the Minar in Pakistan. And you see what he wrote in the visitor's book at the Minar in Pakistan. Was that an attempt at demonizing Pakistan? It was clearly an attempt. By I was part of that visit. I was then handling uh, the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran division in the Ministry of External Affairs. That was a moment of great hope. It was not
So
demonizing
if
Pakistan.
if
No,
I can
let me
say,
get.
But that's precisely my point. That's
No,
precisely my point.
if I may
If we have managed all of this in the past, if we've managed all of this in the
no,
past,
if I may
why should we not invoke
no,
these
if
models that you are talking about?
no,
Why should
I'm
we
entire.
invoke
Yes,
model
I
of
will tell you.
confrontation?
I will tell you. I will tell you. Mr. Vajpayee met with a rebuff in Kargil. Thereafter came uh, Manmohan Singh. As Sharmal Sheikh, he went a step ahead. What followed was Mumbai. Modi himself, for the first 2 years, showed the greatest flexibility. He met with Pathankot and Uri. In Sati Lamba notes in his book that even in 2017 he was wanting to explore options. And then came Pulwama. And that, you can argue that that should not have deterred him, but it did. It did.
Okay.
Because the mood of this country changed.
So then, in
And
conclusion,
I do hope, my fervent hope is this, really, that Pakistan reconsiders seriously in this age, this digital age where the world is moving rapidly ahead and getting transformed, seriously thinks about its eastern neighborhood and how to proceed.
okay, Maleeha, I know you need to go as well. We are running slightly over our time. I'll give you a concluding thought as well. We'll consider that Vivek's concluding thought. Um, but the question of
My
evidence
concluding
has not been answered here to any satisfaction, in my opinion.
look, all of this, whether it's evidence, lack of it, lots of it, my point is we did dialogue with each other in the past. We need to resume that dialogue.
But
We
his
need to
point is
talk.
each dialogue ended in tears. So how do we
Well,
address that?
yes, well, yes, we too have a history. As I said, we have clashing narratives. We too can invoke events and developments where we felt we were betrayed in the dialogue. So does India feel that way. Accept it. But that's precisely the problem. If we didn't have that problem, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. We have a major problem. And I think the only way to address it is to revive a back channel and to see if we can get a conversation going, to address each other's mutual concerns. It has to be mutual.
Vivek, do you think it would be helpful? You think it would be helpful if Pakistan proposed a joint investigation or at least even asked formally for evidence and saying that, well, if you have any evidence, share.
Khurram, I think a lot of things are done publicly. I think a lot of things are done. That's why I invoke the notion of a back channel. That's to allow the country to say things and do things which are perhaps not possible in the charged political environment for both countries.
Vivek, do you see a diminishing role for diplomacy here?
Well, I, as a former diplomat, would never like to think that there is no role for diplomacy.
I said
But we are
diminishing.
in a very, well, I don't even want to see a diminishing role for diplomacy, but at this time, I think Pakistan has to introspect very, very seriously, and I saw no evidence of that in the statement that came out or the press conference that was given after the National Security Committee meeting. I deeply regret.
We'll take that as your concluding thought, and we'll take Maleeha's concluding thought as well. We have no choice but to find a way forward, and talks, especially through a back channel, are the best way to do so. Thank you, both of you, for taking the time out to have this conversation with me.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we'll
you so much.
upload this right away, and I'll share the link with you.
Thank you, Khurram. Thank you, Maleeha. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.